Hello, and welcome to the Astrology Channel. I am Joji. I am an astrologer and a part-time Minecraft construction worker. That's what I do on my spare time. As always, I'm here with Kyle Pierce
I'm Kyle Pierce. I'm the one true inventor of the pizzeria
and an astrologer.
and an astrologer. Yes.
Multitasking out here. But on that note, Kyle, what's happening this week?
Well, Mars enters Leo this week on Tuesday. Mercury enters Sagittarius, and Venus will be square Neptune. Big element switch from water signs to fire signs.
Yeah, and I feel like this week and the next will just be continuing these shifts, which is pretty interesting. But anyways, moving on to our Monday. As always, it is the moon's day. The moon is waxing in Sagittarius, out of element in her own decan and Venus's terms, moving from a Saturn square towards a Jupiter opposition and a Venus conjunction. The biggest thing that we talked about last time that we've been here with the moon was that the moon was heading towards the square to Saturn. So the moon in Sagittarius really builds on this sort of sense of urgency, of speed, and all those things. But with the Saturn square, it's speed that maybe leads towards obstacles or haste that can cause more problems than solving problems. But then this time around, the moon is in her own decan and she's moving towards the benefic, so it's a very different vibe. In the image, I have the moon running still before she was running in her horse towards battle, but now she is running towards a temple where she will be cleansed by the spirits of good fortune or whatever. It's kind of like the moon running towards a moment of salvation in a way, or cleaning herself and setting herself up for what's to come.
Yeah, actually, this one makes me think of the moment that I realized that Joji was a very, very good astrologer. And it was when you used this like baking a cookies analogy and how like it has to have like the right amount of moisture and the right amount of heat. Otherwise, like the cookie falls apart. And I feel like what's happening here to me is that like little moon, baby moon is like making cookies for the first time in Sagittarius in its own decan. Like, yeah, I'm going to do this by myself. And then like Snidely Whiplash Saturn steals a key ingredient of the moon's recipe and like the cookies just end up falling apart. And so the moon runs to mommy and says, my cookies didn't work. And mommy says, oh, I have like a whole bag of like Toll House, cookies here for you, which is not the same as the cookies you make for yourself, but it is a nice recompense. And then, Venus makes you feel better by talking all kinds of shit about how much of a dick Saturn is and how, we're not like that. It's just me and you against the world, baby.
Yeah, I feel like that's the big theme of the day. It's just this shift from Saturn toward Venus, from something difficult to like a bit of a silver lining. And I think that's why we settled at a 2 difficulty for the day. It's not an entirely difficult day. And there is some utility there too. We settled at a 3. But Kyle, who is potentially baking cookies today?
Sagittarius is definitely where the cookies are getting baked. So keep an eye on your Sagittarius planets.
Nice. Well, moving on to Mars. Now fiery as hell. And Leo, out of element. Slow in Saturn's decan and Jupiter's terms, moving towards Uranus's Antestia.
When any planet ingresses into a new sign, it tends to announce itself and make itself known visibly. And today, on Tuesday, November 5th, Mars's day, Mars in Leo is going to announce itself. And Mars in Leo is just leaving that opposition with Pluto. It's the end of the horror movie when like the main character emerges covered in, blood and like weird gore and, emerges onto the street and everybody's like, whoa, what happened to that person? And like Mars emerges like onto like the news set with like a story to tell, and it's a doozy. There's probably some like wild tales that may or may not be true, but Mars certainly thinks that they're true, or it seems very convincing. And Mars in Leo, wants to be seen. It wants to assume positions of leadership, but it will tend to do so in a Mars way, which is maybe through coercion or through acts of aggression or through intimidation. So, might see people telling wild, scary stories in an effort to force themselves into positions of leadership or visibility.
Yeah. Is that the election day?
Oh, yeah. It's election day.
Oh. Oh my God. I didn't take that in. So I was sitting with this and just thinking about Mars having kind of cleared its stay in Cancer after opposing Pluto. So in the image, I just have that same child warrior, but now they have faced battle, and now they're wounded and maybe scared and maybe angry and frustrated. I feel like the Leo piece is maybe identifying itself with some of that pain and that fear and all those things that have happened recently. I'm kind of just using that as a mask in a way, which is not super exciting because it's like Mars really owning that sort of like pain body and victimhood sometimes, which is why it's not an easy day. We settled at a 4 difficulty. It's not quite our 5 that we had a week ago, but yeah, it's a little tricky one. Utility would give it a 1.5. It's one of those moments where we're just kind of, at the whims of fate, just let her do as she may. But Kyle, who is our sad warrior of the day?
Well, I think it's going to make itself very visible in the Leo space of our lives, especially if you have Leo planets. But definitely look to the Mars-ruled spaces for sure. Aries and Scorpio, Mars can definitely see both those signs.
All right, moving on to our Wednesday. It is Mercury's day. Mercury now in Sagittarius, out of sect in his own decan in Jupiter's terms, moving from a Pluto sextile to a Saturn square. Mercury in Sagittarius is one of my favorite placements. I know that Mercury is in detriment out there, but I just love Mercury and fire signs. I'm biased because I have a Mercury and fire sign, but it's just nice and fun and speedy. But I think that this Mercury in Sagittarius is not like the others. There's a lot going on, and that is what we have in the image here. A lot going on in Mercury's desk. Just entering into Sagittarius, Mercury has their own decan, so there's this sense of autonomy that comes in there. And I always find it interesting because both Jupiter and Mercury kind of have the first decan of Sagittarius and Gemini, but like the opposite way. And like we've been talking about Jupiter and Gemini as like the beginning of Jupiter and Gemini is pretty great because Jupiter has all the ideas and it finds that really good idea. The problem is that it keeps generating ideas and it doesn't settle on the one that has worked in the beginning. Now I feel like Mercury is a bit of the opposite of that, where opposite but similar. It's really not about finding the best idea. It's really about just going in all directions all at once. And this is what we have at Mercury's desk today. Just a whole bunch of papers, a whole bunch of headlines, a whole bunch of different things that Mercury is trying to communicate to the world.
We'll say for the record, I have a lot of positive things to say about Mercury in the first, and Sag in general, but especially in the first decan of Sagittarius, because that's the Mercury ruled decan of Sagittarius. However, I'm not going to say any of those things today because I want to focus on what, to me, signifies the beginning of what I'm going to call NoFactCheckNovember. So Mercury is now in, the spin room where it's receiving, trine rays from Mars. It's saying, yeah, Mars, I'm down with what you're throwing down. You want to tell a story about, how billionaires kidnapped you and fed you baby fingers for lunch every day for a week, and you want to use that to justify this or that. I'm down. In fact, I know exactly how to market that and make it go viral, make people believe it. Because you were talking about how Jupiter and Gemini shows up to Gemini is like, oh my God, so many facts. Ooh, but like loses sight of which facts need to be utilized or applied. Mercury is a little less interested in what the facts are in Sagittarius. There's a lot of misinformation that will be happening over the course of this month and into December. And, we may be acting on information that is not founded in reality or may be twisted or warped in order to serve a specific interest.
Yeah. I think that maybe the word of advice for the day or the week or just for this whole season and Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, just to like think before you speak or think before you share something or really stop yourself before proliferating Mercury's messages out there into
Yeah.
the world. Yeah, because Mercury and Sagittarius will do the thing first and then think about it later. And I think we need to reverse that a bit.
Yeah.
On that note, today is not an entirely difficult day. It's a 2.5 in difficulty and a 3.5 in utility. Like we said, there's a lot that Mercury is capable of doing here. But Kyle, who should be extra careful actually about this?
The mutable signs as a whole, I want to say, but especially Sagittarius and then Virgo and Gemini, because they're Mercury ruled.
All right, continuing with our Jupiter story in Gemini, in detriment in his element in Mars' decadent terms, soon being mutually received by Mercury through an opposition and retrograde.
I think part of what makes this week interesting is that Wednesday, Thursday, Mercury to Jupiter in each other's signs, exchanging information, and sort of being the answer to each other's question in ways that are both very useful, because those mutual receptions can be very powerful, but they're also, because they're both in signs that challenge key components of the nature of those planets, you get too many words, too many ideas, and maybe too little filter or not very effective filters. I think that, to me, we're seeing the beginning of what's going to kind of look like echo chamber spaces that are going to get very loud and almost cacophonous in these sort of feedback loops. And we're going to start getting like little separate worlds of information that will eventually start to clash with each other. But for right now, we're sort of going on our merry way, sort of like, oh yeah, I agree with that. I agree with this. That makes sense, with the people that we do that with, without really maybe realizing that we are in some ways sort of prisoners of our own bias.
Yeah, with this one, I was kind of having a bit of a callback to the Jupiter Mercury trine that happened in Libra. Because I think one of the things that we said there is that it was this moment where Jupiter got the blueprint from Mercury of how things should be done. And now Jupiter going retrograde was kind of setting itself up to follow that blueprint and to pursue that plan. I think that this is a moment where the blueprint or the plan starts to malfunction. And that's what I have in the image. It's just Jupiter looking at the instruction manual and being like, I tried this, but this didn't work. And then trying to find alternate answers to the thing without knowing how the machine works or without having a reliable blueprint. Maybe Mercury gave the wrong blueprint to Jupiter. And this is what I was seeing in the image. That there's both of them kind of like hashing it out on the phone, like what's gone wrong here, and just trying to problem solve, but they're so far that it's kind of hard to really get to that. And I feel like the sense of distance is something that will work itself out as these retrogrades go along, because we'll spend a lot of time with them. But I really feel that opposition of just like two people having two completely different ideas about how a problem should be solved and having to collaborate in a way, otherwise nothing will get solved. And for that reason, I settled at 2.5 difficulty. It's not too difficult yet. We're kind of just like planting the seeds of misinformation, I guess, is what we're running with. And so there's a lot of utility in there. We settled at a 3.5 because we can, again, kind of like call back to Wednesday, be cautious around what it is that we're planting out there into the world, what it is that we're proliferating into the communicational sphere. But Kyle, who is paying attention to today?
But yeah, today, I mean, this is a very mutable, focused week. I would definitely be looking at all your mutable sign planets, because what's happening here is definitely going to affect all of them.
Well, moving on to our Friday, it is Venus's day. She is still in Sagittarius, out of element, Peregrine in Saturn's decan and Mars's terms, moving towards a square to Neptune. This one was an interesting day to sit with for me. The Venus in Sagittarius journey was interesting as a whole. We talked about how Venus, as of late, kind of has set herself off into this quest, defining potentially what love is for her, but maybe even greater questions about what she really wants out of life. I think that this moment in the later degrees of Sagittarius, especially as she's in the decan of a malefic and in terms of a malefic, Venus is kind of sitting with some of the realities of her desires, I'd say. It's like Venus went off into this Scorpio journey where she had a lot of fun, experimented a whole lot, and in Sagittarius she had a little bit more fun, but then she got carried away with some responsibilities that have met her along the way. And now, having had both of these things and being able to hold both of these things in her hands and weigh it down in true mutable fashion, she's now trying to find a sense of cohesion, I find, within that desire and a sense of responsibility that will become even more prominent as she goes into Capricorn. And so in the image, I have Venus getting off her horse, because she's been in her horse for this whole time, and she's just looking off into this huge mountain that she's got to climb. She's bare feet and just having this introspective moment. And I think that that's where we get the Neptune square, this just deep introspection into what those desires are and why she will be climbing this mountain that's in front of her, and why she is stripping herself of her horse and of all these things that are speedy and fast and exciting to turn to things that are more serious in life. I think that's an interesting callback to our Neptune episode that we did not too long ago. And I think that if you want to understand a little bit more of today, I would definitely watch that one too.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree, because Venus in Sagittarius here, I think, wants to commit and is like willing to, and maybe even is seeking out like something to like test the commitment in order to like solidify it. And Neptune is sort of throwing this square at Venus, but it's not the like challenge to what it is that we're committing to. Like, you're playing soccer, you're running towards the goal post, the net, whatever thing, you're trying to score a goal, but then you see that like, oh, is that like a mirage? Or like, is that like goalpost the reflection of water? Like, whoa, like there's a stop and like is what I'm chasing actually the thing that I'm going for? And I don't think it's an inherently negative thing. I think there's just a moment of doubt or confusion about whether or not the goalpost is moved or the target that we're going after is actually where we want to go. Yeah, just maybe hard to score goals this week because I feel like the outlines of the net are a little shifty.
And I think that that's why we gave today a 3 difficulty. It's a little difficult, but 2.5 utility. I think that the imbalance of difficulty and utility today is just this. It's about having these internal battles between your desires, your needs, your responsibilities, and all those things. But who is getting introspective today, Kyle?
I think it's the mutable signs still. Sorry, guys. It's all you. But maybe pay attention to your Venus ruled signs as well. Taurus and Libra.
Moving on to our Saturday. Saturn, almost there. So close, Saturn. In Pisces, out of element, Peregrine in Jupiter's decan terms, soon receiving a square from Mercury while stationing direct.
I think Saturn is a key player in the overall effect of this November, or the overall theme for this month, which, again, hashtag NoFactCheckNovember. But because Mercury applies to Saturn, and Saturn is the fact checker, is that like, that's true, that's not true. And Mercury, kicks the ball at Saturn, and Saturn's like, whoa, like that looks like I don't know what to do with that Mercury thing that just came at me. It's kind of amorphous and shiny, and like, I think Saturn is going to get confused or not have the proper tools to resist the cascade of like viral media that is raining down on society. I don't think Saturn is able to play fact checker effectively today or much of the month. I think it's especially in an awkward place right now because we're building up to the station direct, but like Saturn was already retrograde and slow, but it's like slowing down again.
It's interesting that we're talking about that in a week where we're so focused on we're so focused on the Mars and Leo ingress. Because I was just looking into this because I remembered that the Mars Saturn conjunction happened really close to 12 degrees, which is where Saturn will station direct. I just didn't know exactly where it was. And it was at 14 degrees. So it was just 2 degrees away. Back when I was doing these daily horoscopes and they were just written horoscopes, I was still making images. Saturn was in this Piscean journey. It had a lot of help from Jupiter at the time. Things were nice and beautiful. The view of the ocean was great, and Saturn was having this transcendental experience in this ocean temple. And then Mars comes along and entices Saturn to be skeptical and to destroy the temple that it's sitting in. This is kind of what I had as the narrative for Saturn in Pisces. The destruction of that temple was what set Saturn into this journey where Saturn was this lost lady in the middle of the ocean because now she had nowhere to stay. Now she's returning back to that same spot, and I believe that was in April of this year, April 9th, around that time. And now everything's different because people came along and fixed the things that you've destroyed. And I think that the emotion that I was really sitting with for that is just the sense of being lost again in a place that used to be familiar. And it's like, what is this? Yeah, and I think that's the challenge of today. It's just dealing with some of these changing landscapes. And I think the slow motion of Saturn kind of really draws that out for a long time. So we settled at a 2 difficulty and a 1.5 utility. It's not super difficult. It's not super useful either. It's just a little confusing. Who's confused today, Kyle?
Oh, I think we all are a little, but I think we're going to be feeling it in Pisces. But I do want to look a little more to the Saturn ruled signs for this one, just because those are the signs where we're really looking for the brutal, hard, knowable facts, and we're having a hard time. It's not that the facts aren't there or that they don't exist. It's just that nobody's listening to them.
Well, moving on to our Sunday. The Sun is in Scorpio, out of element in his own decan in Jupiter's terms, departing from a Saturn trine and heading towards a Uranus opposition. So I really don't think that we close the week and it's nice and uplifting moment, but I don't think it's another chaos and deflating moment either, despite dealing with a Uranus opposition. The thing that I was sitting with was this transition from Saturday to the Sunday, and how despite the Sun moving away from this Saturn trine, maybe kind of just carrying that out again. Because last week we talked about how the Sun in the cave was visited by the spirit of his father, who gave him advice on how not to fuck up his life the same way that his father did. Now, the Sun continues in the cave, but I think I almost had this vision of the Sun is now seeing that same landscape that Saturn is seeing from the cave, because there are still signs that are trying to each other. But where Saturn is heading towards that space, the Sun is far enough that it has the ability to have this third-person view, or this detached view from this changing landscape. I feel like the Uranus opposition, as much as it's an opposition, can also bring this bit of an epiphany to the Sun, where it's just yeah, I see what I am not. And just by seeing what you are not with such clarity, you're able to not know what you are, but at least you have a point of reference.
I think the Sun is kind of my favorite planet this week because it is more out of the action than everything else. And it has its own, it's got its own little power source, or in its own decan in Scorpio. And it is approaching that opposition with Uranus, but it's for the most part not really getting too bogged down with what other planets are trying to tell the Sun. There's some of that clarity and an ability to find out or define what your role is within a greater context. I think it's good for, like, if you are a leader in a position where you are being challenged, there's an ability to, like, maybe see what the strength in not getting, like, dragged into every conflict. Some attacks are bait, and, like, knowing that some things are bait and others are not. Basically knowing when to stay in the cave, when to stay, like, out of public view and not get embroiled in, like, every confrontation. There's a lot to be learned, I think, from that. And if we're engaging with the world on a level that is looking like things are kind of a little crazy right now, there's that, like, well, not every fight is for you. There's not everything is your responsibility to, like, fix or take charge of. There's a little bit of minding, your own space. And like you said, taking in the lessons learned from, like, quiet reflection internally. The Uranus opposition is going to be a little funky, but I think that it's a little more like, well, if everybody else is being crazy, I am going to be the stable, calm center, radically calm and not trying to burn down civilization like Uranus conjunct Algol.
Yeah, and that's why I like what you talked about, like minding your own space, because I think that that's kind of the gift of the Uranus opposition, is that it very clearly defines what your space is and what other people's spaces are. And I think that's the tension, but also it's nice to know where you're at and this whole ordeal. But on that note, it is a 3 difficulty day, but we gave it a 3.5 utility. So there's a lot that can be done here. The Uranus opposition is a little tricky, it is a little difficult, but there's things that can be done about it, which is nice. But Kyle, who is doing things about this Uranus ordeal? Who are our solar heroes today?
Who are our solar heroes? Scorpio is the king right now. So find the nearest Scorpio in your life and bow to them, because they are your lords. Yeah, and Leo. This is like a Scorpio-Leo kind of focused, I would say.
One Scorpio to save us all. That's all we need. Well, guys, that is our week. Let's take a look at our week at a glance. With Monday, we had the moon running into a temple, running away from Saturn's difficulties and grouchiness into Venus's soothing hands.
Tuesday, we're punching the guy with the mic and taking it for ourselves.
On Wednesday, that punch is making headlines everywhere, all at once.
That's a viral punch. Jupiter, we are recirculating the viral punch to our friend group on social media and exchanging takes on it and solidifying our take on it versus other people's take on that punch.
And on Friday, Venus is involved in that whole situation, but she's trying to detach herself from that whole story. So she's getting real introspective and thinking about how to move on from this Sagittarius cacophony.
Saturday, we're thinking about seeing if that punch was actually an AI generated, but then we decided not to. That sounds hard.
And on Sunday, a Scorpio is coming to the rescue, I guess. Or at the very least, just thinking about what we need to do to get out of this mess. Well, let's look at our difficulty and utility ratings for the week. And it looks like things are pretty wobbly. We get a big spike in difficulty on Tuesday, but otherwise, Wednesday and Thursday, there's a lot of utility, maybe building up on some of the difficulty from Tuesday. But I think that if we're clever and true Mercury Jupiter fashion, we're able to work some good stuff out of this.
It's a rough week, guys. I mean, it's a weird week. I think it's more useful individually and personally than if you're trying to participate in larger affairs. I have plans and kind of creative ideas I want to play with these. I'm not sweating it too much as long as I just focus on my life, but yeah.
Focus on your life. That's the advice for the week.
Focus on your life. Yeah. Be your own hero, baby.
Yes. Well, guys, this is the week. If you would like a reading with me, I am Joji and I'm at themercuryrising.com.
And I'm Kyle Pierce. I'm at KylePierceAstrologer.com.
All right. See ya next time.
Next time.
Bye.
Ta-ta.